real excited about today.
Super excited.
The whole crew's here. Mm-hmm. We got me. Pat steps in a second. We got Diggs here. We got Nick. We got I kept wanting to say at-tone Diggs.
He's literally too excited. He's so excited.
He is.
By the way, every time I think I want to say at-tone Diggs, at-tone Def goes in my head. Just so you know that. I don't know if it happens to anybody else. Ty Schmidt, Bailey, and Zito. We're all here because, you know what, we have this probably is going to go down as one of my favorite guests to date.
All time.
If not favorite guests. Without further ado, let's get to it.
Behind the Badge.
This is so fitting. It's a true American badass. Maybe we'll give this to him. For now on,
For
it's his song.
Copland.
For Copland.
Joining us on the phone is a retired federal agent completing 27 years of service with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. You're not supposed to leave out the E. Everybody leaves out the E. He's best known in law enforcement circles for being the first federal agent to secretly infiltrate and ride with the Hells Angels. No big deal. He's a New York Times and international best-selling author. You can find his books, No Angel, My Harrowing Undercover Journey to the Inner Circle of the Hells Angels, and Catching Hell, A True Story of Abandonment and Betrayal, anywhere that books are found, or you can go to jaydobyns.com if you have any questions about getting Jay Dobyns shit. All right. Jay, thanks for coming in, brother.
Right on, man. Thank you for having me, and thank you to your audience.
Yeah, man. And by coming in, I mean, we're doing this by Skype. This is our first Skype interview. We're pretty excited about it. We had a couple bugs to work out there at the beginning, but it looks like we're all good now. So, man, I want to start off just to overall give people a picture of what you are, because our listeners know my law enforcement background. So you were always a legend among people that worked in the undercover community around here. Everybody I worked with, the older guys had the story about you, and then I would pass on that story to new guys when they joined the unit, you know, like, hey, this guy, he was the guy. He was like our undercover Jesus, right? He had accomplished more in undercover work, pretty much more than anybody else. So that's why I wanted to have you on here and tell your story. You started off, you were a football stud, right?
Well, I don't know if you'd call it a stud. I was a football player. Right? Like when I look at my football career, I was a great high school football player. I was a good college player, and I was a terrible pro.
Okay, all right. So you were a wide receiver at the University of Arizona. Where did they go after that?
I did. You know what? I had no plan B.
Yeah.
I was going to be a pro football player. And
Okay.
I went to the 1984 NFL Combine, right? And I was an all Pac-10 player, and I was going to go and show off and show all those scouts and coaches and general managers how valuable I was, right?
Right.
So we're running and jumping and doing all this stuff, and I find Al Davis with the Raiders out on the grass.
Okay.
And I ran up to him and said, Coach Davis, how am I doing, man? I'm a Fred Biletnikoff fan, and I always loved the Raiders. And he looked at his score sheet and he said, Dobyns, you're the fastest slow guy I've seen today. So they put us together in this group, right? And I'm with a couple guys, never heard of these dudes. Same size, same build. One guy's from a little school in Mississippi. Another dude is from Kutztown State, which I didn't even know there was a Kutztown State, right? So I shake hands with them. Hey, man, where's your school? Oh, we're in Pennsylvania. And so I'm thinking to myself internally, my internal dialogue, I'm whipping everybody's ass today, right?
Right.
So 10 minutes into the drills, I realized I was not going to be a professional football player. That's how long it took. But the guy from Kutztown State was Andre Reed, who, as you guys know, played, 15 years in the leagues in the Hall of Fame.
Sure.
And the guy from the little school in Mississippi went to Mississippi Valley State. It was Jerry Rice.
Nice.
So I was not necessarily judging myself against the fairest competition. But nonetheless, I just physically could not do what those guys could do. I couldn't run or jump or anything that they could do. So my plan B, I didn't have a plan B. My plan A failed, and I didn't have a plan B.
Right. Well, there's no shame in that. I mean, very few people on the planet can compete at that level. But you obviously were a gritty sumbitch, I guess, to get to that point, to be a slower white fella. that caught footballs. Even to get to that point, it's pretty good. So I'm assuming it's pretty much grit based. So we couldn't have found out you couldn't go to the NFL. Did you like have cop in your blood and through your bloodline, through your family? What made you think, oh, that's what I want to do?
You know what? I'll tell you what. I didn't. And at the time, this was mid '80s.
Okay.
The television show Miami Vice was super popular.
It was.
And so as an audience, we had never seen a cop show like that.
Right.
Everything had been very procedural, like uniform cops and detectives. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, Sonny Crockett shows up, and he's wearing a Hugo Boss suit, and he's driving a Lamborghini around South Beach. You know, when he's dealing with these flashy, flamboyant kingpins, and there's a ton of cocaine on some barge out in the harbor. And he's at these mansions, and there's these big titted stripper models like bringing him martinis.
Yeah,
and I was like, you know what, man? I think I can do that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that show had us all hooked back then, I think. So how did you end up with ATF? Was that by design, or was it one of those things where I'm just going to apply with everybody, first one to take me gets me?
You know, it was by design because I knew I wanted to work undercover, or at least try to work undercover.
Okay.
And ATF had still does the most dynamic undercover program in federal law enforcement. So that's where I wanted to go. That's where I knew where my home was.
Okay. So how long, when you go in, so like where I worked, I had to start as a uniform officer for a little bit, and then I became a regular detective, and then I had to go to undercover. So they kind of picked from people that had outside experience, in other fields before you could get there. Federally, do you just walk right in undercover? Are you hired for that, or do you got to work your way from like a regular field agent?
Well, it starts pretty quick, but I came prepared now. I have a prop for you, right? I was waiting for the star. I was waiting for Pat to show up.
There he is.
What's going on, man? I am so excited.
So I got hired on a Monday, right? 4 days later, I've been on the job 4 days. I haven't been to an academy yet, and I got taken hostage and shot, right? So I'm going to show you this shirt if you can see it, right?
Holy
that
shit.
hole right there is where the bullet went in my back. It went through my lung. It narrowly missed my heart. And it came out of my chest right there.
Oh,
It's a lot of blood.
Day 4?
So that was 4 days. With the feds, we get paid every 2 weeks. I hadn't even gotten a paycheck.
So let me pull back a little bit because you jumped into that fast. You had not even been to the Federal Agent Academy, FLETC, I guess it's called now. I don't know what it was called then. You hadn't even been to the academy, and you're working in an undercover capacity?
I hadn't even test fired a pistol at a shooting range yet.
Jesus. So how does that happen? How did they're like, dude, you look so much like what we need. You look like a bad guy.
There's a football tied to it, right? We're going out to arrest this cat, and he takes off and runs from us. Well, you know what? I wasn't fast by NFL standards, but by cop standards, man. I was 4'3" in Copland. So I went and tracked this dude down and not knowing what I'm doing, right? I get taken hostage and shot like 4 days on the job, and I'm laying in the dog shit of a trailer park with blood coming out of my chest like you're holding your thumb over a garden hose.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Right? And I referenced like the Miami Vice was my inspiration, right? I was thinking like, man, I don't remember this episode with Sonny Crockett.
How long were you held hostage? How did that? Tell me how that went down exactly. So you're in a foot pursuit and you become a hostage.
The cat that we were chasing swung around behind me, had a gun to my head, stuffed me in a vehicle that was there, and was basically holding the gun to my head saying, let's go, get me out of here, let's go. And to be honest, I had a moment of clarity. And I was like, this cat's going to shoot me, but I'd rather him shoot me here with some of my partners around than 20 miles down the road where he's going to execute me on the side of the street, right?
Yeah.
So I pulled the keys out of the ignition and just dropped them on the floor. And when I wouldn't leave, this probably 15-second gunfight erupted inside this vehicle with like dozens and dozens of rounds fired, with me just sitting there, absorbing it.
So you have your backup. Your boys are firing into the car.
shit.
They're firing into the car from the outside. The guy that had me hostage shoots me and then is firing back out of the car. So it was like a Quentin Tarantino sequence.
So you're dead in that guy's head. In that guy's head, when he shoots you, he thinks you're dead. Now he's going to try to kill everybody else.
Yeah, this cat knew. I mean, we had learned afterwards that he had stated, like, there is no way I am not going back to prison. You know, he obviously had some bad experiences there, very likely in the shower, and wasn't going back.
That's the worst dude to deal with, for
Dufresne.
sure.
Andy Dufresne had the same scene.
It's always, I know it's like, that's like the worst possible scenario. You started off your law enforcement career with the worst possible scenario, because every cop out there has had a moment where they just acted without thinking and ran to where they shouldn't have ran and got there and thought, oh, fuck, that was stupid. But nothing happens. With you got held hostage, you shot, and you got caught in the middle of a gunfight, and you're 4 days in.
Well, I'll tell you what. So I get transferred to Chicago because I wanted to work undercover, right? And they're like, well, you can't do it here. There's too much publicity around this shooting. So I get transferred to Chicago. A year later, I'm in another gun battle. I did an undercover deal for some machine guns with some gangbangers outside of Joliet, Illinois, and got into a shootout with these guys, got shot, got run over by a car. So within 18 months on the job, I'd been like shot twice, run over by a car.
Hey, I don't mean to laugh, but this is some of the most insane fucking life stories I've ever heard in my life.
This is
And
crazy.
here's the thing. You know what? I loved it. I loved it, man.
You'd have to,
I
because
loved every day.
yeah, I
loved
assume
every
you
day
do,
of it.
or 4 days in, I get taken hostage and shot. I'm putting in my resignation. Like, you signed up to stay on for another 26 and a half years.
Well, after
It's
that
incredible.
first shooting, I had all these attorneys, these liability attorneys lining up saying, hey, man, we can get you millions of dollars. You should not have been put in this position. You weren't trained. The government has huge liability for what happened to you. Like, let us make you a millionaire. You know, but I grew up in a blue-collar house. My dad was a carpenter. My dad pounded nails for a living. My mom scrubbed people's toilets for a living. Right? I didn't know what money was. Millions of dollars didn't mean anything to me.
Right.
I just wanted to get back and try to do it the right way.
Undercover. I'm even from my background, I am like in awe right now. First of all, I didn't know you could just walk right into undercover. Like,
Yeah, I
that's
was wondering why I haven't done that yet. Excuse me, I would like to be undercover. Throw me out there so I can potentially get shot tomorrow.
I assume that had something to do with the era. I was probably now they're like, you know, hey, we're gonna make sure everybody gets trained before we throw them in the middle of a drug deal or whatever. But
The art of undercover work is dying.
Yeah.
It's not that common anymore. But in the late 80s, man, we were thriving and surviving behind street operations and undercover work.
before we get into the big case, let's talk a little bit about like what the mindset of being undercover, like, and the difference between deep undercover and the stories I've told these listeners. You know, my undercover work was like day to day. All right, today you're going to go buy some rocks in this housing project. And then afterward, I went home to my family. It was a good day's work. You know, to go deep undercover, like in an infiltrating capacity where you got to blend and actually live as one of them, whatever. Like, there aren't very many people that have ever done that. There aren't very many people that can do it. Like, you go, all right, so I've explained to our audience, like, if we look at Pat being the NFL, that's the 1% of the top 1%, right? The 1% that made it to a Division I college at that level, and then 1% of them makes it to the NFL. There's 1% of all cops who can just fool bad guys on the street for street level buys and stuff. And then there's 1% of those that can do what you did. So explain the mindset of, first of all, I want to live this life. Secondly, once you're in there, I mean, you obviously just loved every minute of it. What about you makes you that person?
Well, I think your analogy was spot on. So you use this NFL analogy, right? Mm-hmm. And Pat's experiences, you know, in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And we as fans, we criticize athletes and we critique athletes, right? But what people don't realize is that if you go to the worst team in the NFL and then you go to their practice roster, the guys that can't even make their 53,
yeah,
and you look at the worst player on the worst practice roster in the NFL, that guy is an amazing football player.
Yep,
and he's
agreed.
better than any of the people that are out there criticizing ever dreamed of being.
Right. Yeah.
So like you translate that into undercover work, there's hundreds of thousands of cops out there, but there's only a handful that can survive and thrive in that environment or want to. You know, no one holds a gun to your head and makes you do it. You have to want to do it.
Agreed. And I think Pat would appreciate this analogy as well. Not only that, but you're like, just like a player is in the NFL, like their GM, your chief, your captain, your supervising agent or whatever, they didn't play. You know what I mean? They never were undercover. But here they are making decisions for you and trying to tell you how to do your job. How frustrating is that?
Well, yeah, you get people that advance, and then all of a sudden they got a title behind their name, and they think that makes them an expert. And it doesn't.
Exactly.
In every field. I couldn't even fathom in this one.
Right? I'll tell you what. I'll tell you another sports analogy where it ties together for your show is that, like, any wide receiver out there can catch a slant. That's part of the business. You have to be able to catch a slant. But how many of them are willing to drive over the middle to catch a slant? It's willingness, man. The great ones are. The ones that are exceptional will go in there, and they're willing to go inside and get that ball, knowing that they're going to get their teeth caved in, right?
Yeah.
The same thing goes for undercover work. Like I wasn't exceptionally great at it. I was willing. I was willing to try, and I was willing to try to do things that other people didn't want to.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. Did you feel, were you scared the first time you did it? Did you feel like, oh, shit, I'm about to shit my pants right now?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is learning to be comfortable while you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, you know, those first couple deals, man, you're trying to talk to a guy, and you're trying to be street, and you're trying to be smooth. And, man, like, your hands are shaking.
So George Young, when he was walking out of that airport with cocaine in Blow, he says, like, in his mind, he has to just go there. For you, did you just have to go to a place where you're like, fuck it, I'm a gangster now. That's what I am. Is that just kind of what you had to do?
Yeah, absolutely. There's red flags when you know, like, man, this is going bad. I need to remove myself from this. There's also times where those spidey senses are tingling, and you can tell it's trippy, and you just literally have to, like, pull your nuts up and go and use your expertise and your experience, you know, and it's comfort and confidence. And it's the same as in sports. I don't know which one comes first, but when you're confident, then it allows you to be comfortable. Or you're comfortable, and then it allows that swag of confidence to come out. I don't know which one's first or second, but I know they go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And it's a different fight. Like you're out there, you're a warrior, but you're a warrior with your mind when you're undercover, right? So SWAT guys, I give them all the credit in the world. They're badasses, you know, they're warriors with a gun. They act as a team, and they go in and they're ready for armed combat, where you're out there, like, all you have are your wits and your ability to talk some bullshit. That's all you got. You don't carry a gun most of the time, right?
That's perfect. You know, and a story. So we raid the Hells Angels clubhouses after my infiltration, and all the SWAT guys are there, and they're taking trophies in front of the insignias. And I hand them the camera back after I took the picture, and I said, you know what the difference between you guys and me is? And agreed. I love the SWAT guys. Right. They're exceptional. They saved my ass many times. I'm like, you guys have weeks to plan for this, and you do tape drills, and you show up with knee pads and elbow pads and M4s and a sidearm and Kevlar helmets and Kevlar vests with ceramic plates and goggles and inner perimeter, outer perimeter, dogs, helicopters, all this shit, right? All your Oakleys and your boots and your Velcro and your dip and all your shit, right? And I'm like, I went in there by myself with a 5-shot stuck in my boot and a body wire taped up the back of my leg. Yeah. That's the difference between me and you.
Okay.
What an alpha move, by the way. What a moment that had to be for that SWAT
their
team.
response is typical SWAT. You know, they take a drag off their cigarette and they're like, too bad for you, dude. You should have came with us.
So, all right. So let's step into Operation Black Biscuit. That was the real name of it, right?
That was the name of the infiltration operation into the Hells Angels, yes.
Named after a hockey puck? Black
It
Biscuit?
was. You know what? The case agent didn't want any leaks. He didn't want anybody being suspicious or curious. So if this was some kind of glamorous, cool Hollywood name, he didn't want to trigger anybody. And he's our case agent's a huge hockey fan.
Uh-huh.
So when he named it Operation Black Biscuit, it had a hockey theme, but all the supervisors thought it was racist.
Yikes.
You want to call it what?
It's hilarious. All right, so you get grabbed up as the undercover guy, the UC guy, right? So there's a case agent who's obviously got some kind of investigation going on with this chapter of the Hells Angels there in Arizona. Is that how you got there?
Hells Angels in Arizona, actually in the West Coast, were like running wild. Like with impunity, the violence was out of control. So the case agent came to me and wanted to take a crack at these guys, and everybody said it was impossible. You know, the Angels had run for, at that point, like 55 years in their history and never been fully infiltrated. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, man, I'm not necessarily sure I was ever smart, but I was always willing, right? So I was willing to try.
All right, so you
Over 5 decades of impossible infiltration. You've been shot twice already at this point. Hey, you want to go do it? Yeah, fuck it.
You know, over the course of my career, I was involved in well over 500 undercover operations. Mm-hmm. And Todd, like you said, everything from dime bags on the street corner out of the park and 8 balls up to cartel dope. You know, I bought like pea shooter Saturday night specials up to shoulder launched rockets, missiles. You know, street dope to cartel dope. Pipe bombs that some tweaker was making on the workbench in his garage up to servo activated like remote control C4 devices. Jesus. So when that case came around, like I was groomed. I was ready.
Oh yeah.
You know, I was prepared for it.
Yeah, and you had the resume. This is probably the biggest case I assume that field office had probably approached up to that point. By the way, was there any sense to you that this was the Holy Grail? Because just speaking from my own experience, like if you got an opportunity like this, like everybody always looked up to you, right? In my community anyway. Like, oh, if I just got a chance, man, if I could really just get in there and infiltrate this big crew or whatever, like I'll be a legend. I'll be known forever. Like, was there a sense going into it that like, this is a really big deal? This is like, needs to work out.
There was that sense of massiveness to it. There was a sense of, to be quite honest with you, there was a sense of intimidation to it. Yeah, wow. I was like, man, like I've always operated as this hood rat, as this white trash trailer park, like drug running, drug dealing hitman, right? So then you're entering into this biker world, and their protocols and the rules of the game are different, right? So I had to learn that on the fly a little bit.
Were you like you're a motorcycle guy? Like, were you?
Not really, man.
Really?
You know, not really. I had to get up to speed pretty dang quick because you're riding with guys who are the best motorcycle riders on the planet. You know, these dudes go out for a carton of milk and they take the front wheel off the ground, man, and ride wheelies to, you know, go get a pack of cigarettes.
Right. Oh, man. So you had to get on a bike, get trained up.
Well, I saw the part in the special where your first ride with them, you were going 100 miles an hour, at least you said. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you literally needed to have a pair of pliers to get my hands off the grips when that ride was done. You know?
I bet. So you start, all right, so obviously you can't just like.
Hold on. I ride a lot. I ride my bike a lot. I've seen some guys, though, that ride that are talented riders. I would be scared shitless let alone the fact that they could all fucking kill you immediately. Let alone that bike could have killed you probably numerous times. Was there any sketchy situations on the bike?
But you know what? As I gained their trust and their loyalty and their love, I no longer was worried about getting shot or stabbed by these guys. Okay. I was worried about driving my motorcycle into a telephone pole.
I could imagine it, because there's some shaky times, even for like the most experienced rider. There's some shit that pops up that you got potholes, fucking anything that could just happen that could ruin your life.
Well, you know, like riding in California, we're riding in packs. We're riding like super fast, 2x2, like 18 inches apart. And then, you know, you're on a California freeway and you start getting into traffic and these guys start splitting lanes, but they don't back off the throttle. These guys are splitting lanes at 80 miles an hour.
Wow. I couldn't do it.
I couldn't do
I
it.
got too much bitch in my blood. When it comes to riding motorcycles, I'll be like, I'm out.
I'm
you
sorry.
can shoot at me if you want, but I ain't riding that bike.
I'm sorry I interrupted that. That was
No,
fun.
that was incredible.
Because me just thinking of myself, pretty experienced rider at this point, like over a decade worth of riding. There's still some times where I'm like, oh fuck, that probably could have been sketchy. I'm not an outlaw riding around my first time on a fucking bike. I mean, that's insane to think about.
And the last thing you want to do in this Hell's Angels pack, in this group of guys, is be the sissy.
Right.
You don't want to be the guy that pumps the brakes or pulls to the side. It's like you're all in or you're not in.
Oh, God. All right, so let's talk about how you earned their trust. Like, you couldn't just walk right into the Hells Angels chapter. You started off with a little affiliate group, or what do you call it, a little feeder group?
Yeah, it's not like you walk up to the clubhouse door and knock and ask for an application.
Right.
So there was actually 2 infiltrations within one. We infiltrated a smaller outlaw biker group that was based in Mexico, and infiltrated them. Not to investigate them, but solely for the purpose of wearing their patch, wearing their cut, so that we had credibility in the eyes of the Angels.
Okay.
Right? So we were already in that world.
Right. So,
And then we just started running with the Angels and doing all the craziness that they're in. And then at the point came where I was actually confronted by the Hells Angels leadership and said, you're either coming with us or you're leaving the state, but you are no longer allowed to ride with this other club. It was an ultimatum.
why were you given that ultimatum?
I think just because they saw us, we created the illusion that we were making money, that we were running guns into Mexico.
Yeah.
It's all with these guys. With any criminal syndicate, man, it always comes down to money. And I think they saw guys they liked, guys who represented the lifestyle and the image they wanted, but they saw money going out the window.
Yeah, speaking of money then, all right, so were you like given a real good budget on expenditures and shit, like cash you could float around from the ATF?
You know what? I always had a wad of money in my pocket, a big wad of money in my pocket, and I made sure they saw it every chance I could give.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, wasn't also so I watched the episode on Netflix, the feeder group that you were in, the first bike gang that you were in, wasn't there a guy in there who was starting to spread rumors that you were a cop to Hells Angels?
That is that's the backstory to what I said about this ultimatum. The gang we infiltrated, we got in on them and then ignored them. And they didn't like that. And they started telling the Angels, hey, man, these guys might be counterfeit, man. They showed up and ran around with us for a little bit, and we haven't seen them. So the Angels, actually, within the big picture of the Hells Angels infiltration, there was a cell of Hells Angels that were on a murder mission for me and my partners. And they were going to kill us because they thought we were trying to infiltrate the gang. And I went to one of the Hells Angels leaders, convinced him that everybody was wrong, that everybody had me wrong. And that's when the ultimatum came that said, hey, man, well, I don't know what's going on in the past, but from now on, you're either with us or you're gone. And I don't want to ever see your face again.
Wow. But you had to be grinning on the inside. You're like, fuck, I'm in. This was the whole objective, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? That's a great part of it, but now I'm under their thumb. Now I'm under their control. I lost all my independence. When some chapter president called at 4:00 in the morning and said, bring me a vanilla milkshake, I didn't have the ability to go tell him to go fuck himself anymore. I had to go get a vanilla milkshake.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. So there
You're running coffee for the fucking Hells Angels.
Selling T-shirts, washing bikes, polishing guys' spokes, running their girlfriends to doctor's appointments, all these unglamorous things that you don't see on Miami Vice that aren't cool, that you have to do to be believable in their world. It's all a test drive. It's a mud check every day.
You were a prospect, right? So
I was a prospect, yeah.
So hey, they do really well on merch, right? The Hells Angels.
Their swag.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, man! Like you go to one of their runs, a rally, and I did that job too. Set up a folding table, and then I'm sitting there selling T-shirts and hats and bumper stickers to doctors and lawyers and school teachers and all this fanboy base that comes out, that some guy who, like, he's pulling people's teeth during the week, and on the weekend he puts on a pair of wraparound sunglasses and a Hell's Angels support shit, and he's Billy Badass.
I was one of the guys, like, for some reason I was always attached to the ATF. I had a couple friends there, so they would always grab me and my partner to go work with them. But they would always take us to the swap meets to work surveillance there. It's 'cause in the Hells Angels, the one time we did it, they had a hell of a merch booth set up. And they were crushing it, man. Like, people love their merch. And then, like,
those guys churn millions and millions of legitimate dollars through all their swag.
It's unbelievable to think about. But, you know, they're a legend. They're a legendary, like, good for a good reason or bad reason. They're a staple of America. You know what I mean? It's a hell of a brand.
They truly are. They're part of Americana. Like, we as a culture are fascinated by them. You look at the success of, like, the Sons of Anarchy show. Like, our culture is fascinated by that world. But it's like looking at the mob world. Like, those television shows and those movies let us go into a place that the common man isn't going to go. Yeah. He's not going to go there. And so there's a fascination with it, for sure.
Well, and I think I'm one of the people that are fascinated by them. Always have been. So I loved going to help on that stuff when I could. But did you find, like, when you're in there, like, you know what? If things were different, like, I'd be friends with a lot of these guys. Like, yeah, they're criminals and I'm a cop, but beyond that, we get along.
Well, I'll tell you this. As an undercover operative, as you know, you can never completely eliminate the human factor. Yeah. So you're dealing with people at times who are doing vile, despicable things. But then you see a side to their life that's human. You see them with their families, with their kids. And you see elements to them that you're like, man, I like this side of you.
Right.
You know, there was a couple guys who I had grown very close to in the Mesa charter of the Hells Angels. Mesa's outside of Phoenix. Like, these guys were, like, I slept at their house. They slept at my house. I partied with these guys. I ate with these guys. They took a woman into the Mesa Hells Angels clubhouse. They boot stomped her to the brink of death. They wrapped her up in a rug, took her out in the desert, and cut her head off.
Jesus.
Wow.
Right? Now, there was elements to these dudes running around with them. Like, they were, like, enjoyable, like shooting pool with them, drinking beer with them, riding bikes with them, hanging out. They were likable. At the same side, they were capable of decapitating an innocent woman because she insulted them. So how do you separate that?
Jeez.
Wow. I think, man, all right, so I got to think, all right, first of all, well, I'll get to the psychological part of it after we wrap up this case. You did this for how long total? Were you undercover?
It was about a 2-year run with these guys.
2-year run.
Like, and 2 years, like, when I say 2 years, I'm saying every day, every night, week after week, month after month with these cats.
You're in it. And at home, you have a family.
I did. Yes, I do.
How did that work out?
Not very good.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah, you know, there was actually I came home one time, and like I'm in my street persona, and my wife says to me, "You cannot walk in this house after being gone for weeks or months at a time and treat us like we're street criminals." And then in my self-defense, I was like, "Man, I'm not a light switch. I can't turn this on and off."
Yeah.
People that dabble in what I do for a living end up dead. And then her response was, "Well, I understand you're not a light switch, but when you come here, you better install a damn dimmer and turn that shit down."
What a line. Did you have to kill anybody to get in?
Well, that's actually a good question. Yes and no. So actually, the way we finally pushed our way over the top was I told the Hells Angels that one of our adversaries was down in Mexico, and I wanted to go kill him.
Right.
I wanted the job. They gave me a gun to do it. They obliterated the serial numbers off of it. They gave me the instructions on how I should do it. And we went down to Mexico and killed one of the Mongols' motorcycle gang members. Beat him with a bat, duct taped his hands and his feet, buried him in a shallow grave, shot him in the head, took pictures, took the bloody cut off of him, took it all back to the Hells Angels, convinced them that I had committed a murder for them. When I did that, they put a vest on me. They put a cut on me and said, like, welcome to the gang. Like, you took care of business. You showed that you are ready to be a member. What they didn't realize, it was all a hoax. We fabricated the entire murder and bluffed them into thinking that we had committed it.
Oh,
fucking awesome.
I saw you guys had fake goat brains and fake blood all over the place. The pictures were very, very convincing.
We brought in a homicide detective, and I knew what my story was going to be because I wanted my story for this murder to fit my cover. So I told this homicide detective, this cat's got to look like he's been duct taped, like he's been beaten with a ball bat and popped in the head. So the homicide detective built a crime scene that fit the story I was going to tell. Wow. And then we took pictures of it. And before we actually put those in play, the homicide detective took those pictures to a homicide detectives meeting and passed them out and said, does anybody have a John Doe out in the desert? I caught this case and I don't have any leads. And all the homicide detectives are looking at the pictures. And once he saw that the homicide detectives, the guys that deal with this every day, believed it was legit, then he called the dogs off on them and said, hey, man, I'm sorry. I had to run this on you because we have an undercover that's getting ready to put these pictures in play, and I needed to make sure that they were legit.
Oh, wow, that's doing your homework, man. That's awesome.
Triple stamp and double stamp.
Awesome.
It's like White Man Can't Jump, but way better.
And that came because you came up with that idea because the case had reached a point where, because you were a prospect, that it was harder to get the kind of evidence you could get when you were an independent, and your agency was about to pull the plug on the case, right? So you came up with this idea.
All the above.
Good on
all
you,
We were tapping out on money. We were tapping out on time. I was physically, mentally, spiritually exhausted, man, from 2 years with these guys. I would work all day and night, and I would go to sleep. And I was so worn out. I would boo-hoo cry myself to sleep at night thinking that I couldn't go another day. And then I'd sleep for a couple hours, charge my batteries, get up and be like, okay, you know what, I can go a little bit more, right? We were tapped out. It had to come to an end one way or another. And I was like, I'll be damned if I've put all this time in and I'm not getting that patch.
Yeah, right? The only guy to ever do it. You're a bad motherfucker, man. I don't know if people just in your regular life recognize that
I'll tell you
enough.
I'll tell you what, Todd. Like, I'm not the best undercover guy out there ever, not even close. But what I'm good at is surrounding myself with really smart, really talented people. And when they're amazing, it helped me be amazing, right? That's like, I was smart enough. I wasn't smart enough to decline the case. I was smart enough to surround myself with brilliant people to help me.
How much? All right. So speaking of your help, like when you're out there interacting on a day-to-day basis, obviously you can't be wired up with a transmitter constantly, or were you with a recorder of some sort? Or was that only on, all right, today we have a clear-cut objective, we need you to record today?
Some days yes, some days no.
Okay.
It was hit or miss. You know, if I felt like I was going to get shook down or patted down or search for a wire, obviously, you know, that's not the day to have a piece of electronics like duct taped up your ass. You know?
Right. All right, and let's say on any given day while you're in there, they discover you're a cop. Your cover gets blown. How close is backup? Or is there any backup?
You know what? As you know, like typically there's cover teams hovering, you know, whether they're paying attention or not. Like, you know what? You're never quite certain.
Right.
Whether your wire's working, you're never quite certain. I always viewed me as my cover team. I always viewed things that, like, if I have a problem, it is not on anybody else to solve. I have to resolve it. Because I always looked at the cover guys. I thought the best these dudes are going to do is show up late, get some retribution, and hose my brains off the porch. That's as good as it's going to get.
Yeah. That's
a good way to look at it.
you have to out of necessity. This is something I used to help teach at this undercover school, Top Gun, they call out here in Indiana.
Are you guys busting somebody outside, by the way? There's been like 45 cops fly by our office since we started talking to you.
So in that school,
Todd, you were a Top Gun instructor?
yeah.
Oh, look at you.
And it would have been a better movie.
Todd.
So this is one, like that mindset that we always teach the new guys this when they come in, because we're the role players. They come in to do their buy or whatever. And we're like, okay, stop right now. Shit goes bad. I pull a gun or I go to the drawer for a gun. I call you out for being a cop. What's your plan? Bus signal. I'm going to call the bus signal. I'm like, okay, your transmitter is going to work about 60% of the time. So maybe you save the bus signal as your secondary plan and come up with a different primary plan. And they're like, what is it? We're like, there's a door right there. Primary plan is get my ass out that door and run in that direction as fast as I can as I scream, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, or whatever my bus signal is. So
I'll tell you something that you said earlier. You talked about like buying street dope, and then we evolve into this conversation of like infiltrating an international organized crime syndicate, right?
Uh-huh.
From having done both, and you know, I think buying the street dope is more dangerous, to be quite honest with you.
Really?
Like, you're in this big syndicate and you spend time with them and you gain their trust and you gain their loyalty and you gain their love. And there was no doubt there was a point in time where these guys that I was working on would have stepped in front of a bullet for me, right? But when you're buying street dope out of the park or out of somebody's crack house, that is super dangerous, especially when you're dealing with kids, because they don't have enough life's experiences behind them to know what it means to point a gun at somebody or pull the trigger on somebody. Super dangerous. Street work, street undercover work, super dangerous. More dangerous than what I did, in my opinion.
Well, that's so interesting, guy. Take it you've done one-offs though, where it's just we're going to use you for today. No, never. Okay. Well, I was going to ask you the difference. I would have assumed for me, I would have been scarier to do what you did. But definitely, I will argue, and you're not going to win this argument, it's more psychologically damaging to do what you did. I mean, that's
well, you know what? It's the amount of time you spend. Like, over the course of time, it wears on you. But you know what? What's more dangerous than knocking on the door of a crack house with people that don't know you, especially like when you're in the hood and you're a white boy trying to buy a rock?
Yeah, you're a robbery victim.
Get your ass blasted off that porch, right? These guys, like, once I won their trust, man, they weren't going to hurt me. They were going to protect me.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. We did. It was a regular thing.
Well, except for the 80 miles an hour weaving through traffic.
Yeah.
Until you show up in court and testify against them.
The things you don't think about. There was like the typical white boy undercover move. Like you would go out when you had to go to the hood, and you're like, oh, all right, I'm going to get robbed today. That was just your thing. You're like, yeah, I walk in the projects, I'm going to get robbed half the time.
You know what? Like, one of my best friends bought more crack rocks out of inner city Detroit, and this is a white boy, than is imaginable, right? And this dude dresses like with a baseball cap and like a golf shirt and Dockers and loafers with tassels on them.
Uh-huh.
And he walks up to the crack house and says, I'm here to buy crack. And they say, get off my porch. And he's like, man, I'll get off your porch, because guess what? Your neighbor's selling crack, and this neighbor's selling crack. Someone's going to buy it. And you know what? Like, you think people in the suburbs don't smoke crack? I don't want to be here. I have to come down here to get my product. And I know you're going to sell me at white boy prices. I know I got to pay more for it. I don't even care, because I'm marking it up when I take it home anyway. So just sell me the damn rock.
That's the most fun. That's
fucking mayo.
That's
from,
the funnest part about the whole job. Funnest part about the whole job is having to, it's like doing comedy. Like crowd work versus telling a joke. Having to think on your feet is the most fun. Like coming up in the moment. And I never pretended to talk street or any of that stuff. I just was myself, because you know what? People look like me and talk like me like crack just as much as everybody else does. Mm-hmm. So I love being that guy and be like, hey, well, yeah, you don't look like you belong here. Yeah, I'm here buying this so my girlfriend doesn't come here and suck your dick for it and keep my $20. And that's the perfect. Yeah, I love that part.
It's believable.
Yeah,
it's believable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man. So this comes down. The indictments, the raids, all that stuff. What was the final like aftermath? Like how many people did you take down the whole charter? Were this done?
I think we arrested 55 people. 16 of them were charged with RICO. We had a couple death penalty charges on the guys that beheaded the girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, the sad side is that the government internally started arguing about how to prosecute the case and present evidence, and we half blew up our case. The good guys half blew up their case all on our own. Which as the undercover operator is extremely frustrating, because I'm like, man, blood, sweat, and tears for 2 years, and now you guys with neckties on are going to fuck this up? Are you kidding me?
It's the worst. So there was some problems on the investigation end with.
It was problems they were legal problems on discovery, like what we were going to let them have, what we were obligated legally to let them have, what we were going to hold back, what we were going to use to protect informants and things like that. Stuff like way outside my pay grade.
Right. Yeah, that's tough.
Well, then they burnt your house down after, right, too?
Well, when the case ended, and now this international organized crime syndicate, who they believed Jay Bird Davis was this gun-running hitman. Right. When they find out that Jay Bird Davis is actually Jay Dobyns, a federal agent, yeah, they were a little bit pissed off.
Did you not get arrested that same night that everybody else got arrested? I assume they would arrest you and then take you out the back door. Is that what happened?
Sometimes, yeah, we do that, and that's a good tactic. Sometimes we didn't do it on this case. But you know what? When all the buddies that you've been running with for 2 years are all sitting in a jail cell together, and like the one guy who was in the mix isn't there, they figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah. And they did
that motherfucker.
And they did burn your house down, right?
Oh my! Like when it came out, the death and violence threats were, dude, they were through the roof, right? I had the Hells Angels had a contract on me. They sold a contract to the Aryan Brotherhood. Oh. They sold a contract to the MS-13. Oh, the Russian mob, the Bratva was trying to get in on it. LA street gangs were trying to get in on it. So I had 4 or 5 murder contracts on me. There were threats out there to kidnap and torture my daughter, who was a teenager. There were threats out there to kidnap my son from school. There was a threat out there to videotape the gang rape of my wife and make me watch it. And then ultimately in August of 2008, arsonists attacked my home and burned my house to the ground.
Wow. Jeez. Wow. Were you home?
Did you move?
Like what I was gone. My wife and my kids were home. Jesus.
Oh man.
And so ultimately the investigators come out, they determine it's an arson, and they said, you know what, this was a botched, failed assassination attempt. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So did you not go into, I guess because you're like witness protection sounds like it was created for this exact situation. Is that not an accurate?
Pat, I'll tell you what, man. There is no such thing as witness protection for cops. Witness protection is for informants. Witness protection is for cooperating defendants. Like we'll put Sammy the Bull Gravano in witness protection. He's got 17 murders behind him so that he'll rat on John Gotti.
Yeah.
But if Todd needs some help, hey, dude, you're on your own, man.
That's what you signed up for.
Jeez.
That's their mentality? Yeah. Now did you at least because you still live in Arizona. Like you're so close to where all this went down. Has it finally are you to a point now where you're like, okay, everything's good now? Or do you still from time to time, you catch yourself watching what's going on behind you at a restaurant or looking next to you when the car pulls up at the stoplight beside you?
Yeah. You know what? I'm pretty careful. I don't live in fear because if I live in fear, they win. But I live with caution. Yeah. I know what they're capable of. I've seen what they're capable of. But I try to live my life. Uh-huh. I stood up to it. And to be quite honest with you, after this amount of time, they've just found new people to hate, man. I think they're bored with me.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Hope so.
Makes sense.
Let's not
That's
poke
wild.
the fire.
Yeah.
Today, how do you did you ever have to psychologically? I would assume this takes a toll. That there's some sense of PTSD or something associated with putting yourself through 500 some undercover operations. This maybe being the biggest, but you had a lot of others too. Is there any after effect psychologically?
I'll tell you what, there's a good side to that. There's a happy ending to all that, right? I was an absolute train wreck. I was like the nastiest, darkest, most despair. I hated everybody, man, to be quite honest with you. But it highlighted for me, my failed spirituality, right? I realized I'm a control guy. I tried to control everything, right? And make everything go the way I wanted to. And I realized I'm not controlling anything. Man, none of this is on me. And I realized, if the only time you're talking to God is when you're in trouble, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true. Yeah, man.
Jay, was the decapitation incident, was that the wildest thing you saw in person in your time?
I was not there when Cynthia Garcia was murdered. I was aware of it after, and then tried to pursue the two murderers. A guy named Kevin Augustiniak and a guy named Paul Eichscheid became a focal point of what we were trying to do, because we were trying to tie them in to the murder. We had a decapitated body. This lady had like 5 or 6 kids, man. That like mom just doesn't come home one night after going to party with the Hells Angels, and so we were trying to catch them, but we were trying to get justice for those kids too.
How do you stay out of that? Like I assume that there was other occasions where they're like, hey, can you help us kill this person, or things like that? How do you stay out of those situations? Well,
I'll tell you one, I'm in Phoenix, and I get sent on a murder mission to kill some guys in Las Vegas. And it's non-negotiable. And they're telling me, you're going to do this. This is how you're going to do it. And then the kicker, the caveat was, we're going to be hiding around the corner. And if you don't kill them, we're going to kill you. That was, those were the rules, right? So en route to Las Vegas, I get in contact with some cops, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, tell them what the plan is. And actually the cops intervened on the targets of the murder and got them stopped and got them held. So I showed up to where I was supposed to be, when I was supposed to be there, waited around, patrolled around like I was ready to take care of business. When the victims never showed up, in the eyes of the Hells Angels who were watching, all they knew is that I was there ready to handle the work that they gave me. They didn't know that I had orchestrated to have it diffused.
Hold on. So you just called the Las Vegas Police Department. Hey, what's going on? Yeah, so I'm a cop, but I'm in the Hells Angels. They want me to kill a guy. Is there any way you guys can possibly pick him up and make sure he doesn't show up there? And they're like, yeah, you got it, buddy. 10-4. We just got done arresting some blacked out kid on the strip anyways. Is that how that goes?
That's an oversimplification of it, but it's not that far off. I had people at Las Vegas Metro that I could call and say, hey, man, this is Jay Bird. I'm running up here. This is the deal. I need some help, and I need it now. But your explanation of it really isn't all that far off from the truth.
Wow. It's all about your network, huh? You just call and like, I need this taken care of, and you know the two guys to reach to in that area. They get it done.
Exactly. I had worked with the Vegas Metro guys like very closely. I had spent a lot of time in Vegas after Timothy McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma City building. Yeah. Right? I got sent to Vegas because McVeigh, there was some remnants of McVeigh's crew in the southern Nevada area. So I got sent there to try to scoop up and figure out who in the zoo there, who was left after McVeigh, did his deed in Oklahoma City. And in the process of that case, we actually got in on a crew of people that were planning to blow up 3 Las Vegas casinos as a part of Oklahoma City Part 2. They were going to blow up the Mirage, the Treasure Island, and the Golden Nugget. Shit. And we diffused that case in the process of this undercover infiltration. But I built some strong bonds with those guys in Vegas.
I'd imagine.
So when I got sent there, like I had people to call that knew I was legit.
3 bombings?
They're like,
never heard of this.
Who just called you? Oh, it was that guy that saved 3 blocks of Vegas.
He needs what?
These cats were planning Oklahoma City Part 2. This was the leftovers from McVeigh, and they were like, hey, McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma City bidding in Oklahoma City. But so what? It's in the heartland. It's farmers and ranchers and good Christians. We're going to knock the piss out of America in Las Vegas, where there's drugs and booze and sex and prostitution and gambling. Like, they were going to make a bigger statement. And we got in on a crew where we actually sold the crew C4 bombs that they were going to use to cause these 3 explosions. And then when we transferred the devices to them, we knocked them off, and that was the end of the case.
That's just, by the
never
way,
hear about.
That's just something in his resume that wasn't going to show up here, by the way.
I'll tell you why you don't hear about it. It was like Section C, page 9 in the Las Vegas Sun, is because Las Vegas is driven by tourism. And the newspaper sure as hell ain't going to promote that someone was going to blow up 3 prime casinos on the Strip.
Wow. What's your relationship like now with law enforcement, and particularly the ATF?
For the most part, it's very good. Like I've always had a love for street cops, for people with boots on the ground, for the agents that are out there taking the risks to keep me and you safe. With ATF's executives, with ATF's top shelf bosses, man, they wouldn't. If I was laying on the street on fire, they wouldn't piss on me to put me out.
Really?
What?
Wow, that's a real big certificate of appreciation there. I mean, Jesus Christ, you're Jay Dobyns.
Well, when you deal, and probably in any business, right? Probably in your business, in sports, when you deal with people that are insecure, and then you put corruption and power and titles and influence behind them, man, that's a dangerous combination, man.
Yeah, it's real political up there too. So I don't know. I don't know if you saw this or not, but the Secret Service appreciates me. That's a certificate of appreciation.
Ever seen one of those?
I don't know if you've ever seen one of those. I mean, I don't know. You say 3 blocks of Vegas, but I don't know if you've ever got one of these.
I've done a lot of shit, and I don't have one of those, and now I'm jealous.
You ever protect the governor at Indy 500?
Nick, you have a question?
Jay, during your time in the infiltration process, you were obviously gathering information to put a case together on these guys. But were your eyes opened at all to the way they operate as, let's call it a syndicate, in the sense that you could take that information and use it against other operations in the future? Or was it mostly just all about taking down these specific groups?
No, that's a great question. Yeah. These guys, the Angels, have modeled themselves after traditional organized crime. So you have various tiers and various levels of criminality, with everything down to foot soldiers down on the ground who are doing the dirt, and then money flows up to the kingpins, to the capos, to the bosses, and they're smart about it. They've taken the organized crime model and how the 5 families of New York operate. And they've stole that model and adapted it for themselves. That's a great question.
They're such a network. There was a guy here, it's a doctor, and he was a member of the Hells Angels, like in Franklin, Indiana, I think it was. Because every now and then they would be like, hey, go drive by the doctor's house. There's 2 bikes outside to get the plate numbers. And
I'll tell you what, there was a guy, there was a Hells Angel that was part of the case we worked on that was a pilot for America West Airlines.
Wow.
Right? And this cat, like when you saw him, he looked like a pilot for America West Airlines, right? But then he'd come home and roll his sleeves up, and he was covered in tattoos. And the best part about this, he was not a guy who was out there doing a lot of dirt, but he was flying a commercial airliner 3 days a week with hundreds of passengers on it. But the best thing I loved about him was that he would bring flight attendants back to our parties.
Nice. Yeah. That's how he got patched in. He had an in with all the stewardesses.
Everybody knew that Ralph made his trip from Phoenix to Seattle and back to Phoenix on Thursdays. And Thursdays, he was going to drag those flight attendants and say, hey, you guys want to party with the Hells Angels? Super cool, super fun, super crazy. You're going to have a great time. And then these flight attendants would show up, and they'd start like pouring booze down their throat and roofing their drinks, and the shit was on.
Oh, Jesus. What's the scariest thing you ever done outside? Would it be included in anything you said here? Like just one thing that, like, if you had your biggest, almost shit my pants moment as an undercover agent.
Tell you what I think probably when I was most scared was that first undercover deal. When not these big, glorious, glamorous, sexy ones, like that one where you've never done it before. I was actually meeting with a gangster on the south side of Chicago, a black kid, who was selling me a gun that was used in a murder. And we were doing a trunk-to-trunk deal. He popped his trunk, I popped my trunk. We exchanged money, the contraband exchanged. And, man, like, if he was paying attention, he would have known, because I was scared shitless.
Yeah, you'll never forget it, probably.
All right.
And then after, you do it, and then you have some success, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. It's like anything else. You look at someone that operates on someone's brain. You look at the guy that flies the space shuttle, and we say like, "Oh man, I don't think I could do that." Yes, you could. With the right experience and training and the amount of time it takes, you could do it. Like what I did, anybody could do it with the right experience and training and all those things that go into making anybody great at what they do.
And willingness. I think that's the biggest. And courage and bravery. A lot of things that you are just leaving off the list here that not everybody has that you definitely have. Todd, you as well, by the way. So you're now retired from the Hells Angels, okay? Right now we're talking to you. You have probably 10 rings on your hands right now, tatted up. You have 8 rings on your hands. You're tatted up. You have one of the most legendary biker goatees I've seen in a long time. I mean, it's still very much a part of you, the biker lifestyle, it appears.
Pat, this goatee is a lot like your hair was before you got the haircut, man. It's like it does its own thing.
My mugshot. I'm sure you guys saw that with the Hells Angels.
That's incredible.
But
yeah, so I got these rings, and I literally have not had these rings off my fingers for any reason in probably 20 years.
Really?
For any reason. I sleep with them. I take a shower with them. I work out with them. On one hand, I have the Virgin Mary, which to me symbolizes like innocence and purity, right? On the other hand, I have a lion because I love the saying, everybody wants to be a lion until it's time to do the lion shit, right?
very true.
Good.
Do you still ride?
I have a motorcycle that literally sits in my garage with a sheet over it that hasn't been ridden for years.
Oh, so it's not something like you left with, this love of just riding.
I was never one of these live to ride, ride to live guys. I got that all out of my system with these cats for sure.
Yeah. I bet. So what do you do now? What's life like now for Jay Dobyns?
Right now, I coach high school football. I've coached high school football for the last 10 years. We're right in the middle of an undefeated season. We're the number 2 ranked team in the school.
Here you go.
And that at the school I coach at, we literally run our high school football program like the college program I was a part of 30 years ago.
Wow.
It is a year-round, huge commitment for the coaches, for the players, for the parents, everybody. I have a podcast for cops called Copland, where I've interviewed some superstar cops that have all kinds of crazy, dynamic, amazing stories. I've written a couple books, as you mentioned in the interview. I'm a public school kid, so I think people are amazed sometimes that I was actually able to put sentences together and make a paragraph and then make a chapter, right? I do some public speaking. I do training for law enforcement groups. I do some corporate speaking, and that keeps me just as busy as I was when I was out buying dope and guns and bombs.
When you when you said Copland earlier, that you ran a 4.2 in Copland, I was like, oh, good name there, Copland. And I'm happy to hear that that's a podcast of yours. That's a great fucking brand.
I didn't hesitate to mention it because it's so small and so tiny and so unknown. It's absolutely no threat to you guys.
No, we want more people to listen.
Yeah.
I think people like you who have done so much for the community should succeed, and we hope everybody listens to that. I honestly hope everybody on Earth listens.
Get as big as you want.
Right
That's
on.
awesome.
There's
Dude,
enough to go around,
You have
dude.
more street cred than anybody else in that whole field, so you should be the host of Copland. You should
Well,
be
here's
the
the
king
thing,
of
you know
Copland.
what? And I don't take
Mayor,
myself
at least.
too serious. I'm proud of what I accomplished. I'm proud of what I did, but I don't take myself too serious, man. As soon as you start taking yourself serious, that's dangerous, man. I don't do that.
You get hit up by Hollywood much? Like, hey, you want to come in and do some consulting on this film or whatever?
I have. I've done some consulting. I actually consulted. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a movie called Den of Thieves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
50 cents.
So I was the law enforcement consultant on Den of Thieves, and if you watch close enough, I have a scene in Den of Thieves with O'Shea Jackson and Jerry Butler.
Nice.
Jerry Butler.
Classic.
You boys, wasn't Nate the snapper?
Yeah, Nate Boyer.
Nate Boyer was
Nate
it?
Boyer. Nate Boyer plays a guard at the Fed.
Yeah.
At the Federal Bank, and I've come to know Nate, and I like Nate.
If you need a good
movie.
story for your podcast, Todd once armed the bad people.
Yeah, he had a gun on his leg. He kicked the trailer door in. Gun went flying off his leg. Armed the bad guy. Door slammed shut. He has no gun. They have 2 guns.
First time wearing an ankle gun.
when you spend a career in law enforcement, when the boys get together, and the same thing happens in sports. When the boys get together, everybody's got these glorious arrest stories and cases and busts and seizures and search warrants. But when the boys get together, those are the stories they tell, and those are the stories they love because they're real.
Yeah, it's the same thing like when I see Pat do it when like he has an NFL buddy or former teammate in here. They all talk about the funny shit that happened in the locker room or one night when they went out. You know, those are the things you hold on to. And
no one's telling the story like, hey, remember when we chased these guys and we got in the shootout and we arrested everybody? They're saying the stories like, remember the time I shit my pants on surveillance?
I'm about to go shit my pants, and I have a meeting. I am so thankful you stopped by Heartland Radio today, man. This is awesome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here with you guys. Thank you.
They still have a lot of questions. I have to go. I am so sorry. But, man, what a fucking legend you are, sir.
Very kind.
Yeah, no problem.
Very kind. Thank you.
That guy was awesome.
He's the best. Thanks for coming in, Pat.
Hey, no problem. Thank you.
Hey, Jay, I'll get you out of here. It's been almost an hour, man. I can't thank you enough. Anytime at all that you pass through Indianapolis, please holler at me and come by and see us here. I'll hook you up with whatever I can hook you up with the comedy club or wherever else. You know, if you want a night out, or I'll go buy you dinner and some. Do you drink?
I drink a lot.
Okay, good. I love it.
Hey, I noticed you've been hitting a vape. I assume you just smoked cig after cig after cig in the Angels.
Yeah, living the dream.
I'll tell you what. There was a point in time during that case. I was smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I was smoking them, like lighting them end to end about as fast as I could smoke them. Plus, like drinking a case of Red Bull and eating hydroxy, like the old hydroxy.
Oh yeah, done that. Ruined my heart.
I was eating the hydroxy cuts that still had the ephedra in them.
Oh yeah.
I was eating those like candy.
You were jacked too, man. So why did you was there workout time at the clubhouse there?
You know, I'll tell you what, man, I ran with guys. There's Hell's Angels that literally are professional, world-class fitness bodybuilders.
Really?
Like, they don't drink. They don't smoke. They get their rest. They're, like, doing meal prepping and waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to eat a filet.
Wow.
And go to the gym. And so, yeah, so, like, I took that and jumped on that and went to the gym with these guys.
Yeah, might as well. You're like, oh, well, I'm stuck in this 2-year undercover operation. Might as well get fucking built. Dude, hey, thanks so much. Once again, I just want people to know that your books are out there. I'm going to name them off again one more time. No Angel, My Harrowing Undercover Journey to the Inner Circle of the Hells Angels, which I assume it's this Operation Black Biscuit.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
The whole complete story of that. And then Catching Hell, a true story of abandonment and betrayal. This is more like an overall, your total career, your body of work.
You're spot on. Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Man, obviously two great books. I can't wait to read it. Go to jaydobyns.com. Find out more about what's going on with him and what he has available. And please, please, please listen to Copland. Mm-hmm. You guys are bugging me all the time about good cop podcasts, and we've yet to be able to come up with one. I guarantee you that's a must listen. So go over to check out Copland. I assume it's on iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff.
It is. It's on all of them. And nice. I mean, I've like, you know, we're kind of just getting started, but we've interviewed like Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone.
Oh, wow.
Donnie.
Wow. You know, like some legendary, you know, some legendary military, law enforcement, firefighters, like with that's stories awesome. That literally, like when you're listening to these dudes tell their story, like I'm sitting there listening to them, and like tears are running down my face with what some of these people went through to take care of me and you and our families, right? And so that's what it's about.
Nice, man. Good for you. Everybody check that out. I can't thank you enough. One more time, guys. Let's give it up for Jay Dobyns.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
JD.
I'm honored. Thank you.